It can be super intimidating to get started climbing. There's a ton of jargon, and it feels like everyone at the wall is an expert in climbing when you first look at it. But really, the people there are super welcoming to beginners, and it's really not as difficult to get started as a lot of people think. Now, in my opinion, the easiest way to get into climbing is to start with bouldering. So there are a couple different types of climbing. There's roped climbing and there's bouldering. And bouldering is a little bit easier to get started in because you're not going to have that fear of heights of going up really high. You're not going to have to learn any skills with ropes. And you're not going to need a partner to climb. You can show up on your own if you want. If you're just going to be bouldering, you don't really need much gear at all to start climbing. You just need shoes and a chalk bag, and most gyms will rent those out to you anyway. So it's really no cost to get started at all, so that's pretty cool. So when you first show up at the wall, you're going to see a bunch of holes in all kinds of different colors. And one of the most important things is the grading system for the routes. So you're going to see tags next to each route with different grades like V0, V1, V3, and so on. And that's basically the difficulty of the routes. So when you're first getting started, you're going to probably want to do VBs and V0s just to get started, and those are going to be the easier routes. And then as you progress, you'll probably get into the V1s, V2s, V3s, and so on. So when you go to start a route, when you're bouldering, you'll see either one or two holds that are marked with tape. And if there are a couple holds of tape, you're going to put both hands on them. And if there's only one hold that's taped, you're going to put both hands. It's called a match on that hold. And then if you look towards the finish, you're going to have either one or two holds that are taped at the finish. And basically, you just put your hands on those taped holds just like the start, and that's how you finish a route. Once you get to the top, you can either down climb, which is what I typically like to do, or you can just drop down to the ground. If you do fall down to the ground, make sure to do that in an athletic way with your knees bent and kind of just softening that landing. You definitely don't want to land with straight legs because that's going to be a really jarring impact. So one tip that's really helpful for beginners is you want to use your feet as much as you can when you're climbing. A lot of times I'll see beginners climbing and they're just trying to do pull-ups on the wall, and that really wears yourself out really quickly. So you want to stick your feet on the wall as much as you can. And kind of related to that, you want to keep your body as close to the wall as you can, so you're basically like hugging the wall. And what that does is it puts more weight on your feet and less weight on your arms, so it's going to be a lot more efficient way to climb. So now to talk about the types of holds in the wall. So the ones you're going to see most often on like V0s and V1s are jugs. And these are holds that you just wrap your fingers around all the way and you just grip onto it. They're pretty easy holds to hold. The next ones you're going to see are called crimps. And these are going to be a little more difficult, and you're going to see more of these in the V2s and on. Another type of hold is called a sloper. And that's basically where you're not really crimping at all. You're just kind of slapping the hold and just relying on that friction to grab it. And these are definitely one of the least secure types of holds. And finally, you have pinches. So pinches are basically like crimps, but you're gripping it with your thumb as well. So it's like a pinch grip. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Sometimes on the wall, you're going to see little outcroppings or cracks or whatever, and these are called nats or naturals. And these are usually assumed that you can't use them unless it's specifically written that you can. So like sometimes at the start, you're going to see nats on. And if it says that, you can use these little features on the wall. So that's kind of cool. And another thing to know is the arete, which is basically the corner on a wall. And these are always assumed to be off unless either the holds kind of wrap around the wall, then it's kind of assumed that you can use it, or if it's specified at the start of the route that you can. Like this one, my friend Steven's climbing it and he's using the arete to start, but you don't really use that in the rest of the route. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about some basics and technique. I'm not going to go too in-depth, but just kind of give an overview of some basic climbing techniques. So the first one is smearing, and you're going to want to use this when you don't really have any good footholds and you don't want to really dangle your legs. So what you do is you kind of just smear your foot on the wall, and that provides a little bit of traction, and it's definitely better than just hanging your leg off the wall. And this can be done on any route too. And another thing, as you get into the more complicated routes, you're going to get into overhangs. And these are a little bit more challenging, both technically and physically. But there are a few techniques that definitely help me climb overhangs. The first is I like to climb with straight arms. So if you're like flexing your arms the entire time when you're climbing, you're going to get really tired and probably not complete the route because you'll be like super pumped. But if your arm's straight, you're not going to be putting as much force on your muscles and you're going to be able to climb a lot more efficiently. Another thing when you're climbing on overhangs is it's super important to stick your feet when you're climbing. You're not going to want to be dangling your feet and just doing pull-ups up the wall because that's really going to tire you out. And kind of related to that, you also, like I said earlier, you want to keep your hips as close to the wall as you can. And that's kind of just bring your center of gravity closer to your feet, and it's going to put less weight on your arms and more weight on your feet. Once you start transitioning into more difficult routes, you're going to reach points where you're going to have to actually disconnect from the wall and jump onto the next hold. And these are called dynos, or dynamic moves. So basically, you're just going to have to go for it and jump onto the next hold. But a lot of times when there's a dyno that is really hard for me, what I'll do is I'll just jump and try to touch the hold and not necessarily try to grab it. And I'll just do this a few times and just get comfortable with the motion of jumping. And then once I'm used to that motion, I can grab the hold. So it's kind of just working in steps up to it instead of just going for it straight away. So after you've been bouldering for a bit, you might want to get onto roped climbing. So what I would definitely recommend is finding someone that's more experienced to help show you how to put on your harness and tie in and do that all safely. So when you're putting your harness on, you want to make sure you get your legs through both leg loops and they're not twisted at all. So there's no twist in the back or the front of the harness. And then you go in and you tighten down those straps until they're nice and snug. Not overly tight, but also not loose. One thing that I like to do is I'll stick my hand in the waist belt of the harness, and if I can't turn my hand, then I know it's tight enough. If I can turn my hand all the way around in the harness when I do this, it's going to be a little too loose, so I'm going to want to tighten that a little bit more. So now that you have your harness on, you're going to want to tie in. So the knot that I use all the time for tying in is called the figure 8 knot. And to tie this, you're going to want to first start out by measuring a length of rope, by measuring from the tips of your fingers to about your shoulder. And then you pinch off a bite on the rope, you wrap it around, and then come in through the back and poke it through that hole. And that makes a figure 8. And then with the end of that knot, you're going to loop that through the 2 points in your harness, the top and bottom. And then you're going to trace that end through the figure 8 you just made. And while you do that, you're making sure to keep those ropes parallel. And as you pull it tight, you're going to see a nice, good looking figure 8. And one way to test to make sure you tie this knot correctly is you're going to want to see 5 individual pairs of ropes. So you'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if you have that and it looks clean, then you've got your figure 8 knot. But this is definitely one place where I would recommend climbing with a more experienced partner to help you check that knot and check your harness and make sure you're all safe. So hopefully you guys learned a little bit in this video, and maybe you're going to be a little less intimidated now to get out and start climbing. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to drop in the comments below and give me a like, and I would appreciate it if you subscribed, and I will see you on the channel next week.